Hello and welcome to our choice event, actually number 70. I can't believe it. It's has been a lot in the past years, and really happy to welcome you to today's webinar, CBAM for Climate Champions: Requirements and Implications. You might wonder why you see me today and not Lara. Lara is on her way to a conference, speaking herself in a panel. That's why I took over today. I'm Yasha. I'm one of Lara's co-founders at The Climate Choice, and I'll be leading you through today's webinar. But before we start into the webinar, we gonna go a little bit about how does this work today. If you haven't been part of one of the choice webinars yet, I'm gonna quickly explain. So we're using the webinar functionality of Zoom. That means I can see you, you can only see me. We don't have a chat enabled, but we have the Q&A functionality in Zoom enabled. So you can use the Q&A functionality to ask your questions, and we will collect the questions during the webinar, and we will then answer the questions in the end of the webinar. So feel free to add your questions into the Q&A. And in order to test that, it's always good to get everyone once testing the functionality. So maybe we can start with that you write your name into the Q&A functionality, and also where you're from. So for me, that would be Yasha. I'm listening in today from, or I'm actually hosting today from Berlin. It's quite sunny today here. Maybe you can try that once. So just write your name and where you're listening in. And there's the first one, Elena from Düsseldorf. Hi, Elena. And Jörg from Wuppertal. Hello, Jörg. Welcome to the choice event today. Wolfram from Grasleben. Hello, Wolfram. Christian von Decklingen in Oberbayern. Hello, Christian. So great, it seems to work. There's more coming in. Petra from Munich. Hi, Petra. Super. So it looks like it's working. I feel that we can go on, and you know how to use the Q&A functionality. Very quickly about us, The Climate Choice. We're doing the choice webinars now for a couple of years as part of our mission of empowering companies to transition to net zero. We're providing, therefore, the climate intelligence platform to decarbonize supply chains, so helping companies to compare suppliers' climate performance and drive scope-free decarbonization. And today, we're going to talk about CBAM, and we have Finn from BearingPoint here today, who will... there's already Finn. Hi, Finn. We have him today giving you an overview of requirements and also implications for your company. And before we start and get Finn on stage as well, we have prepared a poll. And I will start the poll in a second. I hope you can see it. So basically, to give Finn a little bit of an overview on where you stand and what you are working on in your company, we have the question that you can answer through this poll functionality. Where do you stand in terms of CBAM? So is your company one of the affected industries? Are you already working on it? I don't know much about CBAM, and you're here to learn more. I guess my company is affected in the future, so I want to be prepared. And I'm unsure where we stand with CBAM in general. So please just add your answers here. And we actually have the second question also already popping in, which is, in which team are you actually working and preparing for the CBAM? Are you in the sustainability team working on it? Are you in procurement? Are you in the innovation department? Are you in compliance and legal? Are you in supply chain management, or maybe even general management, or other is also an option. So I see a lot of you have already answered. I give a couple more seconds to give everyone the opportunity to provide an answer. And if not, it seems that we can end it. So I'll end it, and I'll also share the result. So where do you stand in terms of the CBAM? So most of you don't know much, or like don't know much about CBAM, but here to learn more. Also, the same 31% is probably affected or thinks they're gonna be affected and want to be prepared for it. And then 25% are unsure where we stand with CBAM in general. And then yeah, a few companies and people are already working in the affected industries and already working on it. So great that you're here. And in which teams are the participants today? So most of you are in the sustainability teams and in procurement, and some are also in other departments. So thanks a lot for taking part in this quick poll. It's always helpful to understand who is here. And yeah, with that, I also want to invite Finn to stage and say hello. Hi, Finn.
Hello, Yasha. Thank you so much.
How are you?
I'm doing good.
Perfect. From where do you listen in, or are you giving the webinar today?
I'm also in Berlin in our office here, right next to the central station. Yes, and I'm quite excited and happy to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Great. No, we're excited to have you here today.
Yes.
So I hope the poll gave you a little bit of a good overview on who is here, who is listening in.
Yes,
Perfect.
it did. It did. So also a warm welcome from my side again to this webinar on CBAM, a central initiative by the European Union aimed at reducing the climate change while maintaining a fair competition in the global market. And it is really great to see so many people in the call, because as the urgent need for the environmental sustainability increases, it's quite crucially important for businesses, and to be honest, actually everyone who cares about the environment to understand how CBAM works. Yes.
Exactly. Thanks. That's great. And with that, I want to give you the stage fully.
Thank
So I'm
you.
going to start sharing
Yes.
my presentation, and then you can hopefully share yours.
Yes. 1 second. Right. So.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
So
Finn, I'll just say very quickly, I'll now turn off my camera, and I'll be in the background, and I'll come back for the Q&A after your presentation then. And with
all
that,
right. Thank you, Yasha. So with this being said, I would like to have upfront a few quick words to introduce my company, BearingPoint, and myself. So BearingPoint is an international management and technology consultancy with European roots and a global reach consisting of over 6,000 colleagues. And because sustainability has always been a big part of us, we have a dedicated sustainability team of 200 professionals since 2010, so over a decade. And together we are empowering sustainability by assisting companies and public sector organizations in their sustainability strategy and resilience, while guiding the businesses and cultural shifts. So a quick words to my person. I'm part of the sourcing and procurement practice for over 3 years, and also actively involved in BearingPoint sustainability team, combining my business expertise with a focus on supplier management with a commitment to the environmental passion. All right. So now I would like to start with CBAM. So as a quick heads up, what you can expect. Firstly, I want to explain general information on CBAM so that we will all have a common understanding. And I think this fits quite well to the results of the questionnaire Yasha had in the beginning. And afterwards, I want to provide you with the next steps on how importers or companies that fall under the CBAM regulation can stay compliant. And afterwards, as Jascha already mentioned, we will have probably enough time to answer all the FAQ things you might ask. Okay, so to provide a common understanding, I would like to start off with this overview, explaining what the CBAM regulation is, how CBAM works and operates, and why the EU came up with the regulation. So beginning with the what. So as I said, it's a regulation of the European Union, and it's part of the EU Green Deal Fit for 55, which entered into force in October 2023. And it can be viewed as an enhancement of the EU emissions trading system. So not sure if everybody is familiar with that, because based on the poll, there were also some people who stated that they are unsure in general about CBAM. So as a side note, the EU emissions trading system serves as a key tool to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions through emission allowances based on a cap and trade principle within the European Union. So, and this is actually why we are here today, because the EU emissions trading system concerns about everything what happens inside of the EU, and CBAM is considering actually what happens outside of the EU. So how does it work? It works like that the regulation establishes a carbon adjustment tariff as a financial mechanism for regulating the greenhouse gas emissions embedded for certain goods. So in other words, CBAM levels the playing field by imposing carbon costs on certain goods imported into the territory of the EU, discouraging companies from relocating their activities to regions with weaker climate regulations. And this is also the first transition towards a why, carbon leakage. The aim of the regulation is to prevent the risk of CO2 emissions being shifted to countries outside of the EU due to cost-related climate policies. So, but there are more reasons to consider besides over reduction of gashouse emissions, such as competitiveness, like carbon leakage can distort the market by allowing businesses that move to countries with lower environmental standards to have an unfair advantage from lower costs associated with carbon emissions. Another point is jobs. So as you can imagine, if the industries are driven to leave the country to take, they're also going to take jobs with them, leading to job losses within the European Union. And one last point, which shouldn't be forgotten, is the tech development. So technologies and innovations are often driven by efforts to reduce the emission. If the industries are simply leaving the EU and going to the regions with weaker climate regulations, entrepreneurs lose the opportunity to create and export clean tech. So overall, to sum it up, CBAM will mirror the ETS in the same sense. So I hope this is clear for a basic understanding. And now I would like to give you a heads up on the respective roles and stakeholders. All right. So as you can see here, who are the actors in CBAM? So we have the operators of the installations. I put the supplier in brackets, who are operating outside of the EU in this case. And later on, I will have a better visualization that it makes a little bit more sense to you, or it's easier to understand how the communication works. But upfront, it's important to understand who are the respective parties involved in CBAM. As second part, we have the reporting declarant. This is the importer. So for example, if there are people from the procurement department, this is basically you. So this is a company that is in charge to submitting the CBAM declaration, and it's in charge to gather all the relevant information from their suppliers, e.g. operators of installation producing outside of the EU. And the national custom authorities, this accounts now for the transitional period. They're responsible for informing the reporting declarants on their CBAM reporting obligations, and they are therefore providing relevant data to the European Commission. And as a side note, the customs authorities are later on also won't allow the importation of goods by any other person than an authorized CBAM declarant. But this will come into force a little bit later, not in the current state. So this as a side note. And as a fourth stakeholder or like party, we have the national competent authorities. They are in charge of checking the CBAM reports and ensuring the compliance with the rules and requirements. And from 2025, they are going to provide the status of an authorized CBAM declarant. This is what I mentioned before. So it's not relevant for this year or for the next declaration, but starting with 2025, only authorized CBAM declarants can report their CBAM declaration. And lastly, overall, we have the European Commission. The European Commission is in charge of reviewing the whole CBAM report submitted by the declarants and also communicating to the national authorities a list of reports for which it has reason to believe that they are not compliant. So they are also in charge for ensuring that the compliance with the CBAM rules and requirements are monitored, they're also in charge for ensuring the compliance with the CBAM rules and requirements. Thereby, they rely on the help of the national competent authorities. And overall, they have a monitoring function for the implementation progress of the CBAM regulation. So this being said, it is a little bit better to understand if we have a look on the next slide. So here you can see the communication flow during the transitional phase, and as a side note, the affected countries. And I will now take some time to explain the before mentioned stakeholders and how they're operating. And as you can see, there are two types of communication flows, which are quite visible here. The one in blue is about the communication outside of the registry, transitional registry platform. And the purple one is through the transitional registry platform, which means what is important to understand is that the transitional registry platform enables the communication between the Commission, as we can see on the bottom right, and the competent authorities. We have them here, and the customs authorities, as on the top left, as well as a declarant. So here we have the declarant. So as a side note, the transitional registry won't be used for enforcement, as the information collected will be used only for data analyzing during the transitional period. So in short, the communication from an importer perspective to all the national competencies and the European Commission, and where they have to, or where you have to submit the report, will always be through the transitional registry in terms of the transitional phase. Talking about outside of the registry, the communication flow, as you can see here, between your supplier and the buyer or the declarant or the importer. There it is important to understand that the communication outside of the transitional registry can be fulfilled in different ways. So can be fulfilled in different ways. There are no real regulations on how you have to communicate with the operator of the installation. The European Commission is providing some guidance in forms of Excel templates, which might help to capture all the relevant information. And so I guess the audience here will be mostly about the reporting declarants. So I want to make sure that everybody understands it is important that you get the login for the transitional registry where you can submit your report, which should be done usually already, and that you have to have an established, more or less, communication process between your suppliers and between you and your suppliers. And this accounts for all the countries. To sum it up, and for which countries it's accountable, that the CBAM applies to imports of specific goods. This is what I already said. However, some countries that are part of the EU ETS, okay, maybe I want to phrase it differently. So there's the CBAM accounts for specific goods for all countries, but there are some exceptions. Either is a country within the European Economic Area, or it is part of the EFTA countries plus Switzerland. And in this case, I'm going to switch to the products that are relevant. So now let's dive into which products are impacted after. Sorry. Now let's dive into which products are impacted after going over the countries of the origin that are affected. So CBAM initially applies to imports of goods in the following sectors. As you can see here on the right, it's cement, iron and steel, aluminum, fertilizers, hydrogen and electricity. These sectors were all selected following specific criteria. In particular, their high risk of carbon leakage and high emissions intensity, which will eventually, once fully phased in, represent more than 50% of the emissions of the industry sectors covered by the European trading system. So in the future, the CBAM may be extended to other ETS sectors. So in the future, it can be, well, it's most likely that these beginning sectors will be expanded, that it will account for the same sectors as the ETS currently. So, and as stated here, CBAM, as stated here, CBAM applies to the specific goods, and the specific goods can be checked quite easily based on the CN number you can see on the right side here. So for us, it is important to understand that we can easily check if our products are affected by CBAM by reviewing the CN code. And an overview can be found here on the right side or on the website of the European Union. So, okay. So, and another important point to understand is that the regulation only applies to specific CBAM goods that are being sold or used freely inside of the European Union. If goods are just being stored for a while or because they will be sent out of the European Union later, or they're going to be processed, and then there's no need to worry about CBAM. However, there are special situations you always have to consider. Let's say you have goods that do need to follow CBAM, but you process them into something new that doesn't follow the regulation. When you sell this new product in the European Union, you have to report about the original goods, like how much you used and how much carbon they had, but not about the new product itself, because it doesn't fall under the CBAM rules. So it is essentially that you only deal with the CBAM for goods that end up being used for sold in the European Union. And there are some specific rules for processed goods. And yeah, so I think this is quite easy to understand and to remember. First thing is to always check the CN code if this is fitting, and then where you are going to distribute the product you imported. This can be quite helpful for a quick check if you are affected. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so I talked about the affected countries and the relevant CBAM goods. Now let's have a look on which part of the product carbon footprint has to be reported during the transitional phase. So in general, we can say that it is a smaller scope compared to the full life cycle product carbon footprint, and that are downstream processes excluded. But let's have a more detailed look. So scope 1, direct emissions generated from the production of CBAM goods at installation level are always a part of the relevant footprint here. And also scope 2, so the electricity consumed to produce the CBAM good, is always relevant for reporting. And for scope 3, this is also quite noteworthy. So scope 3 only in the indirect accounts in specific cases of complex goods. So of specific goods, and as I said, you can have, or like as I mentioned here, so for the specific case scope 3 indirect, the complex goods. If you wonder what this is, so I would like to break down the CBAM goods into 2 types: simple and complex goods. Simple goods are these kind of goods that are these are products crafted from materials that as per CBAM rules don't add any additional emissions. So when we figure out the emissions for these simple CBAM goods, we only take into account the emissions generated during the production. So scope 1 and scope 2 in our case here, then the blue ones. And the complex goods, for complex goods, things get a little bit more complicated. So we need to include the emissions from certain materials, generally the precursors, like if they were used in making the complex CBAM goods. So these precursor materials are also CBAM goods themselves. For example, in making cement clinker, in making cement clinker is a precursor because it's a CBAM good, and it is used in producing the final product, Heidelberg cement, as an example. So in simple terms, simple goods only count emissions from their own production, while complex goods consider the emissions from specific materials they use in the production that are also CBAM relevant. And in general, we can say what is not in scope here and what is a big difference. As you can see on the right side is scope 3 indirect, the downstream scope. This doesn't have to be reported at all. Okay. So now I would like to go through the timeline with you, and yeah, after I hope that we have now a more or less common understanding of the affected product, the affected countries, and what the regulation itself is. Here in the timeline, I want to have a focus on the reporting obligation. So let's break it down. As mentioned in the beginning, CBAM entered into force in October 23, and the transitional period runs until the end of 25. So the reporting declarant has to report quarterly emissions for CBAM goods without paying a financial adjustments, as you can see here on the top left. And I guess so for some of you guys, it is already clear because there has been already one report, where there should at least be already one report submitted. And so, and it was exactly here. So the first CBAM quarterly report was due by January 31st this year, and it covers the reporting period October to December 23. And this report shall include the information on the goods imported during the previous quarter and should not be submitted later than 1 month after the end of the quarter. So as a side note, so if you're one here reporting or in charge of reporting the declaration, and for some reasons you can't get the CBAM report in by the deadline because of technical errors, you can always ask for an extension of the deadline through a request via the CBAM transitional registry I mentioned up front. And from August this year, it is no longer possible to use only references average emission values in the report, as you could have done before. So what does this mean? This means, or this implies for the next declaration, that if the reporting declarant, usually the importer, that if the reporting declarant can use other methods, including default, where can use for the next report default values published by the European Union. Okay, so basically, until this date, the reporting declarants can introduce additional methods as well, and the Commission will check these methods for the calculation and do some fine-tuning later for the final phase of the CBAM reporting. Okay. So on January 1st, the next year, 2025, the EU methodology becomes mandatory for emissions calculations. So what I said up front, that you can use your own methods, this won't be possible by then. And so until December 31st this year, the reporting declarants have the options to employ the alternative methods that provide equivalent coverage and accuracy in terms of reporting. So these methods include a carbon pricing scheme, a mandatory emissions monitoring scheme, or an emissions monitoring scheme at the installation as outlined in the Article 4.2. This is, yeah. So this is accountable until December 31st, 2025. And this is also the date where the EU Commission has time to extend the product scope in terms of the CN number, as I mentioned before, with the hectagon about the different categories and the CN numbers for the products that are relevant for CBAM. So the implementation phase, so you have to imagine that the transitional phase is like a tryout phase where the EU Commission tries to gather some reliable data and everybody has time to get ready with the regulation. Now with the implementation phase, it's the real start of the regulation. So the implementation phase starts on January 1st, 2026 by introducing the final CBAM adjustments and simultaneously reducing the free emissions allowances. So moreover, importers have to obtain an authorization in order to import CBAM goods so that they are authorized declarants. And as I mentioned before, these authorization will be done by the national authorities. And starting from January 1st, 2026, the importers have to declare on a yearly basis the quantity of the CBAM goods imported and not on a quarterly basis anymore. And lastly, they have to surrender their CBAM certificates to cover the declared emissions. So and finally, or like the final result for the first yearly submission of the annual CBAM declaration will be in March 2027 for the year 2026. And as a side note, the CBAM certificates will be sold by all the member states through a common central platform to authorize CBAM declarants established in the member state. Only, and this is what I mentioned before, only authorized CBAM declarants are allowed to purchase certificates. All right. So I want to address that all the things that I've showed here in the future about the implementation phase, they can be easily subject to change, and I think it's most relevant currently to focus on the transitional phase and to get there, or to get your own reporting processes in place. And this is what I would like now to provide you with some practical steps that you can address to stay compliant with CBAM. So the first thing you should do if you're an importer, or importer, declarant, buyer, you should carry out the initial impact assessment. So which of your imported goods will be covered by the CBAM? Check the CBAM applicability on all of your imported goods. And it's relevant to know the origin, the imported volume, and the objective of use. So this is what I mentioned. Do you want to have a free circulation within the EU for this product, or do you just keep it and process it and then export it outside of the European Union? And there are like 5 steps that can be quite easily followed. So I would like just to go with them. This is also where we already had some clients with, and if you feel comfortable, this is something a well-organized procurement department can also do. So does the company import goods regulated by CBAM? If it's a yes, are those goods produced in installations outside of the EU? So this is what I try to say with this slide, with the European map, that it is relevant where the country of origin is based. And if it's outside of the EU, then you have to check if these installations located in the country territory within the scope of CBAM regulation. Yes, it is the monetary value of the goods higher than 150 euros per one consignment. And this is also what is quite interesting to check. The threshold itself, it is at 150 euros, and we already did some checks, and it turned out that the client had nearly everything below 150 euros. So it was from stressing a lot about the reporting to really reducing it to a few to a few products. And lastly, this is a special case, are the imported goods to be used by the military authorities? And this is only no, you have to answer. Then CBAM applies. If it's yes, then CBAM does not apply. This is a special rule in this case. And yes, this would be like the first step to check if CBAM applies to you or your organization. And as a second step, it is important to set up the process to collect all the data on the production side and the underlying emissions. So what were the trimesters when CBAM goods were imported? This also accounts to the fact that the threshold orients on the trimesters of the certain products. So and then check who are your major suppliers of CBAM goods and who in the supply chain holds this information. This can be also quite critical to drive your suppliers to this point that you have a free flow of, or like an established flow of information required for the declaration, because in the end, you as an importer, you are always responsible for the declaration, and it's not part of, or like your supplier or the operator of the installation is here not in charge. It's always you. And even so, if you are not sitting in the European Union, you have to account like a you have to account as a third party declarant who is in charge of the declaration for you. And as a third step, you should have a really well set up reporting process within your organization. So this accounts for all the roles and responsibilities and the governance overall. So you have to check which business function. Quite interesting when Yasha did the poll. I have seen that there are people from the sustainability department here, and there are some people from the procurement department here, and I had contact with clients where it was settled within the compliance department. So there are different different organizations have a different focus, who is in charge when setting up the declaration for CBAM. And as a fourth and last point, you have to link the import volumes with the underlying production side and emission data collected from your suppliers and prepare and submit the CBAM report. So did the supplier share primary emissions data within your organization? Is there an EU ETS-like scheme in the country where the installation operates or where the supplier is located? What carbon price did the installation operator already paid? So you don't have to pay the carbon the carbon price twice if there's an established carbon scheme in the operator's country, which will be most likely hard to find, but you don't have to pay double the price. And lastly, you have to finalize the report by crossing out the data and submit it. And now I want to show you on a quick one-page how we can support you. It is not purely on CBAM, it is more about sustainability topics in general. So we have these three major pillars talking about the consulting aspects. So we can support you in the evaluation of CBAM, in the evaluation if CBAM impacts your business. Thereby we could check the sourcing strategy and the savings reporting, the product costing, and we can also support with the certificates purchasing. Yeah, you can imagine this as the first assessment I showed in the first step, like the 5 steps. We can do different analysis regarding the data quality and what kind of data is required. We can develop the right processes with you. We can set up the overall governance structure, and we can provide guidance in the role and responsibilities allocation. Moreover, we have experience in the supplier data exchange in terms of tools. We work here like with SAP closely, but also with the climate choice that also provide primary data. And lastly, we have an established reporting as a service approach. So we can support you in the development of digital solutions to encompass reporting needs and build an all-in-one reporting dashboard. And this, we have done this. We have a out-of-the-box calculation as a service on-demand solution to calculate this, to calculate the sustainability, to calculate the carbon footprint. It is called the SAP Sustainability Footprint Manager. And yes, we already have gathered some CBAM experience through our 200 people strong sustainability team. I know the CBAM is quite new for everybody, but we are currently helping, or like we have helped clients with the implementation of an ETS carbon reporting system, and we have ongoing projects in terms of the assessment if the organization is CBAM relevant and how we can set up the organizational structures. And yes, that was my last slide. Thank you so much. I'm really excited about the topic, and now I'm really ready for all the F&Q questions.
Super, great. Thanks a lot, Finn. It really gave a really good, great overview on what the CBAM is about and what are very practical steps on starting with it. Thanks a lot. As you've seen or might have seen, there's already a couple questions in the chat. I'll try to condense them a bit so we can go through those. So maybe first of all, can you? So there was one question about intermediates, I would say. So if there's a good or basically the clarification about reporting declarant. So if you import a good right through a intermediate, so which could be here a supplier who imports the good on behalf of the buyer, or a buyer who uses a customs agent.
Yes.
Who would be the reporting declarant in this case? So I hope this is the first question by Sander. If you want to also check it out.
Second, I will open the F&A. 1 second.
Yes.
Who is the reporting declarant in case of? Can you clarify who's the reporting? Contracting. I have to think I have to think about the question 1 second. Contracting. So the first question. So yeah, so now I get it. So the first question I would say it is the supplier, because the supplier is the importer, and a buyer who uses a customs agent. Yeah, then it is the customs agent. But yeah,
So
I would say, huh?
Mhm.
Yeah, it is a customs agent, yes.
Yeah. So basically, it's not possible to say, or basically, it's all the actual buyer that brings the good into the EU.
Yes, yes, yes.
You cannot kind of like
No.
in a kind of like over if you use someone that does this for or basically does this, then they would need to report directly because they are bringing the goods into the
Yes.
European Union. Okay, perfect. Then thanks a lot. And also maybe in that context, also another question also from Sander, if you can also indicate which production locations are in scope for CBAM. So I understand the question in a way that, okay, is it does it matter from where I import into the EU, or is it for every locations?
Yes, I think this was quite hard to follow me on this slide. Yes, so it is actually if you import goods that are CBAM relevant from outside of the EU, then it's always CBAM relevant. So there are like some exceptions, like the EFTA states, for example, Switzerland, but overall, it's always if it's outside of the EU.
Yeah. Okay. Super. Thanks a lot. And then maybe also a question around the tax.
Yes.
Maybe also like how will the carbon tax actually be calculated in the case of CBAM? You touched on it.
Yes. So there are different documents on the website of the EU Commission for different products on the carbon tax calculation. The pricing will be quite similar to the current ETS pricing. Is this okay or like is this sufficient? I don't know the exact number on each product here.
Okay. Thanks a lot. I hope that helps. And then maybe another question from the which one we take? Who is typically taking care? Question by Christian. Who is typically taking care for CBAM in a company? Maybe from your experience, who requests information from BearingPoint about how?
Yeah.
Let's see.
So usually it's well, what I have seen so far, it's purchasing or ESG, and obviously I always close with legal and compliance, but what I have seen that it's also so based in the supplier management department.
The supplier. Okay. Great. And maybe also here's a little bit of a discussion also from Christian. And then also really great, like feel free, everyone, if you have an answer to one of these questions, right? It's a very, very specific topics. Feel free to just put your insights here. But there's a question about how who will calculate the scopes in all these reported goods? The supplier, the receiving company, the authorities, hotels. Yeah, really comparable and validated and so on. And there's already some discussion going on, but maybe your review.
Yeah, so the importers or the declarant is in charge to calculate it. But what the EU is trying to, or like the EU Commission is trying to do currently, or like with with this transitional phases to get some more or less reliable data for comparison, so that they can check quite quickly if the declaration makes sense or not.
Okay, so that also.
Yes, I mean, in the end, if you are like a buyer and you're so lucky that you have such a well supplier base, and they're ready to calculate everything, then that's really nice. I think in reality it's quite hard, and maybe this got also lost in this slide about where I mentioned about the communication flow, which happens outside of the transitional registry. If you have you're the importer and the buyer in this case, and you have your installation of operation, the supplier, in other words, and the EU Commission is providing like an Excel template on their website, which lists all the relevant things you have to ask from your supplier or from your operator of the installation. Yeah, so, but it's a really big Excel.
Yeah. And maybe that also answers then the question from Wolfgang Nimmerichter. So it's not necessarily the supplier that needs to, or I mean, like the supplier provides the data, right? If I reframe what you just said, Finn, but they provide the data to actually enable you as a buyer then to do the calculation and produce the report.
Yes.
Super. And then maybe also in last question, maybe in this context, would the accredited verifier from Venkat, would the accredited verifier fall under regulatory review? Do you have any insights on this, on the topic? Who would be the verifier of the report, how they are basically reviewed?
Okay. Who is going to review the report?
Yes.
Okay.
And
so,
are they regulated? Yes.
So what? Sorry.
And are they verifier regulated?
Yes, they like not by now, but they will be for the implementation phase.
Okay. Perfect. Then thanks a lot. And there is still a couple more questions, so feel free to also just type some answers in, Finn. And with that, thanks a lot for taking the time during the lunch break, basically, and giving the webinar. It was super insightful. And yeah, thanks a lot. And with that, I also just want to just share some last slides and information. So maybe also something what we've done with BearingPoint is Salah. Now I'm gonna go again. I don't know why I cannot share the slide. So here we go. We also produced a climate playbook for Scope 3 decarbonization last year with BearingPoint. There's a lot of information on how you can prepare with your suppliers in terms of climate. What steps can you take to kind of like already start working with your supplier base to prepare them for what's coming. So this can be freely downloaded on our website. And also, last but not least, we look forward to see you again, hopefully in the next webinar, where we then go deeper into actually supplier engagement and specifically around renewable energy. So how to engage suppliers specifically in Asia around renewable energies in the context of supply chain decarbonization. And this will happen on the 28th of March, again during the lunch break, at least in the European or in the Central European time zone. And with that, I want to thank everyone that you were part of this webinar and joined us. And I wish you a great rest of your week. We in Berlin have a holiday tomorrow, but yeah, for everyone else, have a great Friday tomorrow, and see you soon in the next choice event. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.